Incomprehensible and frightening. The Assistant Metropolitan Police Commissioner Cressida Dick struggled to find words to express the true horror of that May afternoon in Woolwich, between the moment that Michael Adebolajo and Michael Adebowale drove their car into Fusilier Lee Rigby as he crossed the street, and that just 16 minutes later, when the men were shot and incapacitated by armed police. Events unfolded that no one could have imagined in their wildest nightmares. Our Home Affairs correspondent Simon Israel traces now the events from their roots to their denouement today at the Old Bailey. And be warned, his report does contain distressing images.
They called themselves Soldiers of Allah, and in one random, murderous, sudden act, they declared war on the British state. Their target was, they said, symbolic of the enemy, another soldier who, by chance, was a machine gunner in the Royal Fusiliers, 25-year-old Lee Rigby. His family, praised by the judge for their dignity throughout this trial, were in tears at the end.
This has been the toughest time of our lives. No one should have to go through what we've been through as a family. We are satisfied that justice has been done, but unfortunately, no amount of justice will bring Lee back.
The drummer was often on ceremonial duties here at Windsor Castle, and also at the Tower of London, where he'd taken up a recruitment post. Mid-afternoon on May the 22nd, the father of a young boy in a Help for Heroes hoodie was returning from the Tower to barracks through Woolwich Town Centre. The only thing that militarily marked him out was his kit bag over his shoulder. Up the road, a Vauxhall Tigra was parked here. Inside sat the two murderers waiting. Michael Adebolajo was the driver, Michael Adebowale the passenger. They had bought a parking ticket so as to avoid any distractions, and for 20 minutes they waited for the point of no return. Then Soldier Lee Rigby walked past and they watched. Michael Adebolajo described it as a spur-of-the-moment decision. As the soldier crossed the road, he accelerated, swerved, and ran him down at somewhere between 30 to 40 miles an hour. Lee Rigby was catapulted onto the bonnet of the car. Then out of range of CCTV cameras came the butchery, the use of knives and a meat cleaver on a motionless body, which was then dragged into the middle of this road. The soldier was their only target, for this, it seems, was about vengeance. Adebolajo even sought out an audience to justify the horrors.
We must fight them as they fight us, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I apologise that women had to witness this today, but in our land, our women have to see the same. You people will never be safe.
Then the two self-declared soldiers of Allah waited again. Only this time, they were waiting to die, to be shot by the police response. So desperate was each one to be martyred, they argued over who should have the unloaded pistol they had brought with. When the time came, Adebolajo, with his meat cleaver, went first. Adebowale had his thumb shot off while waving the rusty gun in the air, but there was to be no martyrdom here. Police learnt little more from interviews with the two. Adebolajo had his head covered with a blue blanket throughout, while holding onto the Quran.
By the qadr of Allah, by Allah's decree, whilst waiting to find a soldier, because between us we decided that the soldier is the most fair target, because he joins the army with kind of an understanding that your life is at risk when you join the army, you know? So we sat in wait, and it just so happened that he was the soldier that was spotted first.
There was no remorse, no regret on his face as he was led away from the dock. He simply kissed the Quran he'd been clutching in his hand. Adebowale, by all accounts, freaked when questioned after, and those erratic bouts of behaviour intensified during the trial. A picture emerged of a man now tormented by religious strictures and haunted by spirits. More than half the court's time was taken up with evidence from various psychiatrists on whether he was psychotic. At one stage he claimed voices in his head were undermining his religious faith, and it emerged that this so-called soldier of Allah had been treated for mental health problems since the age of 11. What drove these two to what was described in court as a barbaric act is still unclear. There's no lengthy timeline to this plot, and no evidence of a guiding hand was presented in the trial.
It's very hard to understand. It is, for most people, probably almost everybody in this country, incomprehensible and frightening that somebody could think that way as he appears to think and be so motivated to do such a terrible act.
Was this plot really that sudden?
There is no evidence that indicates that these people were intending to do that other people knew about it, that there was any long-term planning and preparation. We may never know exactly what happened.
Both were well known to the police and security services, but not their murderous plan, it appears. Neither has the process of radicalisation provided a clear-cut answer. MI5 won't comment. The agency is still under investigation by the Intelligence and Security Committee of MPs. I understand there have been several sessions with the Director General of MI5 himself, and they've had access to many documents detailing a decade of contact with one or other of these two converts.
You think Lee Rigby's family will be owed an apology when all of this has been assessed, that more could have been done to prevent what happened?
I have looked at what we knew. I think I can say I believe that the decisions that we made were rational, were reasonable, were understandable. But let me be clear, if it does appear that the police should apologise to Lee's family, if it does appear that something could have been done which might have prevented this from happening, then I would be the first to apologise to Lee's family, who have suffered the most terrible, terrible loss in unimaginable circumstances.
There's no turning back. The family has justice and wants to move on. Progress may well depend, though, on answers to questions about how the two killers were monitored in the months before Lee Rigby's terrorist murder.